All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Today is March 22nd, 2024. I almost said 2023. No, 2024. Time is flying by. Sorry for the delay in starting the show today. Our guest had a bit of an emergency, but he's with us now, so we're going to proceed. What we're looking at today is the role of dark money, free speech, misinformation, and of course, SCOTUS. And there's only one person I could possibly ever discuss this with, and that's Walker Bragman, because not only is he a stellar investigative journalist that follows all of the dark money, he also has a JD, so he understands the legal issues. So welcome to the show, Walker. Glad you're here with us. Glad you could make it. Good to have you aboard. You wrote a piece for Important Context, your blog or your Substack, I should say, and it's called, you gotta love the title, Concentration Camps, Transphobia, and Election Denial. Anti-vaccine groups rally outside Supreme Court in defense of misinformation. So this is a case that started in Missouri. There's been some appeals and whatnot, but it centers on anti-vaxxers and what they want to do, but it has much broader implications for the court, obviously. So let's just start the conversation talking about the original case and how that started.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And again, sorry for the delay.
That's all right.
So the case started as Missouri v. Biden. Missouri et al. V. Biden et al. And it was a case brought by two Republican attorneys general in May 2022. And the AGs for Missouri and Louisiana, it was actually filed in Louisiana in district court. And the case argued that the federal government had overstepped its constitutional authority by communicating with social media companies and trying to work with them to remove certain types of content, that content being election denial and election misinformation, COVID-19 misinformation, and anti-vaccine misinformation. So at the time, we had just come out of the Omicron wave. It was a pretty devastating COVID wave, killed over 160,000 Americans between February and January of that year. And it was a big deal, and a lot of COVID deaths have been preventable because people are very vaccine skeptical and they're not getting vaccinated, and the vaccines do provide robust protection against severe illness and death. So the government has been trying to get people vaccinated. It has this Biden's whole basically COVID strategy is get people vaccinated and get back to normal. But misinformation online has been a real thorn in his side, and so the administration didn't really have many avenues to pursue legally. I mean, you could try to pass legislation, but that wasn't going to happen. You can try to lean on them a little bit, I guess, with law enforcement. But if the speech is legal, nobody's going to do anything. The only real option available to the Biden administration is voluntary cooperation, and that's sort of what we've seen. But the AGs said even requesting that certain information be taken down, that's coercion, that's jawboning. There's a veiled threat there. And that's not allowed, and you can't, because you're the government, you can't do that. And it's a pretty novel theory, I think, of First Amendment jurisprudence. The idea that government officials lose their free speech rights when they become government officials.
Okay. So what would you say to somebody that's basically trying to argue that misinformation is protected First Amendment speech? I actually agree that misinformation would be protected First Amendment speech, but it doesn't seem to me that that's actually the issue here. But my understanding.
So, yeah, you're right. That's not really the issue in this case, because ultimately we don't see government taking action and clamping down on this speech. Content-based restrictions, by the way, on speech are subject to strict scrutiny under the First Amendment. It's a very high bar to clear. It's very hard for the government to prove. And arguably in a pandemic, the government would have a more compelling interest in controlling the kinds of speech that people see because it's a crisis. People are dying. I mean, COVID killed over 1 million Americans, but that's really not the issue in this case, despite what the plaintiffs or the original plaintiffs suggested. And the two Republican AGs were joined by a number of private plaintiffs who were prolific misinformation spreaders and had their content limited by social media companies. And they were represented by a law firm, a litigation outfit called the New Civil Liberties Alliance, which is a pro-business corporate side litigation chop shop.
Yeah, it's not the ACLU.
No, funded. It's meant to be the far right counter to the ACLU on behalf of like big business, and it's funded in large part by Charles Koch. Back in 2021, it got over $1 million from Stand Together Fellowships, which is the formerly known as the Charles Koch Institute. So it's like a very pro business, and they would love to see the Supreme Court like weigh in and say, no, government can't communicate with private business on how they should operate, like at all. They would love to see that.
So they would.
That's what's at stake.
That is what's at stake, because this group, the New Civil Liberties Group, has also gone up after the EPA. We'll table this till the end of the show. I want to talk about this too, but it's not just anti-vaccines that we're looking at. This particular case is about anti-vaxxer misinformation, but the scope and the breadth of what this group is going after is far more broader than that.
They want to destroy. I mean, look, the New Civil Liberties Alliance is it emerged as part of this right-wing effort to reshape and manipulate and use the judiciary to destroy basically liberal governance in the U.S., destroy the administrative state, undermine our key institutions. I mean, this is a decades-long project, but like, you see it with like Leonard Leo working to stack the courts with far-right judges. And actually this case, I mean, this should have been laughed out of court immediately, frankly. It shouldn't even have, it's a ridiculous idea. They're arguing that government doesn't even have the right to weigh in on like, Aaron Cariotti, who's one of the plaintiffs in the case, and he Missouri v. Biden, he spoke at this anti-vax rally outside the Supreme Court, and he said, it's not the government's job to say what's true or false. It is the government's job to say what is legal and illegal, and that's it. And that is a ridiculous statement.
Yeah,
because
that
you
seems
don't
kind of
lose your
bizarre.
First Amendment rights just because you're part of the government. You don't lose your First Amendment rights. And frankly,
which would be sort of implicit in that case. Like if you work for the government, you no longer have the ability to say that's right or wrong. That seems weird.
Exactly. And like this is, they're arguing this is a First Amendment issue. It's a free speech issue. It is. It's just not a free speech issue for the anti-vax cranks that they're representing or these far right lunatic like AGs. It's a First Amendment issue for the fucking government. Like that's the issue.
Wait, but Walker,
there is
you're
a
not
doctrine
wrong here.
of government speech.
I mean, these guys, they all act like they have, they're jackbooted, right? And the reality is they all have their free speech, which is why they're out there spreading misinformation and why it is.
They are the jackboots. I'll do you one better. They're the jackboots. They're the ones out there trying to look. What they're trying to do is reduce the difference between fact and fiction to a matter of opinion.
Right.
And this has been a long-time project of the political right because they've viewed the media and academia as biased against them because their ideas don't fucking hold up. Let's just be real. Like if you're a right winger in America, it requires believing some things that just aren't true.
I think that is definitely the case at this point. I think there was a time when that wasn't true, but I do think that is the case now. We're in like this post-truth America where things are so far off kilter. It's wild. And the unfortunate reality is the dark money that's funding these groups, they are convincing people effectively to believe in lies. And then once these people believe in lies and they're really committed to belief in lies, they act out on them. So this is why I think misinformation is such an important part of this conversation, because belief in misinformation does lead to a lot of bad things. It just does.
if you want to know how bad it is, the Heritage Foundation in the last day tweeted out testimony from this congressional hearing on COVID. And like this doctor who's out there testifying basically that the vaccines are unsafe and dangerous and unproven, but quack COVID treatments like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, they're reliable and safe. And the Heritage Foundation tweets this out and says, this guy just obliterated, quote, the science. Which
is nonsense. That is not true. There's less. It's insane, Walker. There's less support, scientific support for these quack things than there is for the vaccines. It's
completely insane. Hydroxychloroquine treating COVID with hydroxychloroquine is actually dangerous. And the overwhelming, there is robust research out there that hydroxychloroquine is not an effective treatment for COVID. There are a few studies that suggest that it is, but those studies are all extraordinarily flawed and, been retracted and they're conducted by crank people. It just so happens that they get published, but they
get decimated in peer review, but they become, in Post-Truth America, they become the gold standard for some reason. Yeah, no, I get it.
They continue citing like studies that have been withdrawn.
Yeah.
Taken down. Right. It's ridiculous. I mean, this is the Heritage Foundation. They are the most influential, or one of the most influential right-wing think tanks in the country. And they're out there making anti-vax COVID misinformation that's part of their thing now. It's just part of right-wing
because
orthodoxy.
It's a great issue for them. So this is the thing that I want to get to the heart of. The masses that have been led to believing stuff that isn't true are also victims, right? There are people on the right that are victims of being told this stuff over and over again and then believing in it, right? And it's the dark money behind that. That's the nefarious part to me. So if you have somebody like Charles Koch or Peter Thiel or some of these other ANCAPs that know that there is a massive wealth benefit for the spread of this information to creating, instability in the democracy that they can benefit from, that is a really messed up thing to do. And I think that's what these guys are doing, because if you look at their other cases, they are going after other protections like the EPA provides, which has already been pretty gutted, right? What's left of the EPA. They want to kill it, right? They want big business to be able to pollute working Americans. I think, Jordan's coverage of West Virginia is a prime example of that.
They also went after the eviction moratorium. They are, when I say the New Civil Liberties Alliance is a pro corporate,
pro billionaire, pro corporate organization.
Yeah, masquerading that's what it is. That's who it represents. Yeah. And frankly, that's who the Heritage Foundation represents as well.
I agree.
Their entire MO is protecting big business, corporate power, and wealth. That's it. That's all they care about. And everybody, who's going to be in your comment section, no, they're right. They're right. You're being lied to. You are being duped. And
I agree.
It's sad, but it's true. You're being lied to. And I don't know what to tell you. I mean, if you think for a second that these organizations give a fuck about you and your family and your safety, they don't.
They don't.
They want to use you. They want you to vote for their money. People. Yeah. They want to use you so that they can dismantle the regulatory apparatus that is holding back the what they think is the ideal vehicle for society, which is the free market. That's all they give a shit about.
That is exactly it. They're anarcho-capitalists. They are extreme anarcho-capitalists. That's exactly what they care about. I want to turn now. So you take a look at something called, of course, it's called the Rally to Reclaim Free Speech, because. Of course, that's what they call it.
Yeah.
So this was organized by Robert Kennedy Jr.'s Children's Health Defense and sponsored by a number of other anti-vaccine groups, including Informed Consent Action Network, activists, Dell, Big Trees Group, Frontline COVID-19, Critical Care Alliance, which is known for hawking the anti-parasitic drug ivermectin. And then also sponsoring the rally were two anti-vaccine adjacent organizations, Trial Site News and LiberNet. Both of these groups were new to me. I had not heard of them before. Can you walk us through a little bit about their crazy?
So I hadn't either. So, but what I I had to look into these groups. I was like, what the hell is this? And I think it's really funny. So Brownstone Institute also sponsored this rally, which is part of
our friend Jeffrey
what
Tucker.
drew my attention. Yep, our friend Jeffrey Tucker, who again, when I say these people don't care about you, Jeffrey Tucker is an advocate for child labor and a fan of young people smoking cigarettes. Like, this is not somebody who exactly has public health in mind.
Right.
So LiberNet was started by a Brownstone
Libel. Let's rename it LibelNet.
Brownstone fellow, and I couldn't figure out like what is this? What is this? Like, what is this organization? Because it says, you know, the like liberal tyranny and all of this stuff, like medical tyranny and all this, but it doesn't exactly specify like what is it? Is it a nonprofit? Is it for the best I can tell, it's meant to be a journalistic project. But yeah, it's done by this guy who's totally like tied in with this lawsuit and or like on this ideologically tied in with the plaintiffs in this lawsuit. And it's that's all I can really say about it. The other one is a publication that highlights, it seems to highlight studies that say ivermectin is good. So like, it's like it goes through and that's all it does is to elevate research that says that. Now, like these are organizations that are working to undermine public health. Again, for your audience, the people who don't know, when COVID started and everything was shutting down, big business interests were freaked the hell out. The Heritage Foundation was like, these mitigation measures are the biggest threat to our interests, not the virus. This is early on. This is like in an early like commentary. Heritage published this. It's like out in the open. They say this stuff pretty openly. So they're trying to get America to reopen and ignore the viral threat.
Right.
And so that's really where all of this stuff is rooted. Just an effort to get us to not respond to the pandemic and get back to work and shut the hell up. And what they see today is that our reaction to they don't want us to be able to react like that again to a pandemic. They don't care about the death toll. They just want to make sure that even if there's another pandemic, we don't do anything. We just continue on.
Right.
Because that's what their interests are.
Walker, the wealthy individuals that run these corporations will be safe at home if that's the case.
Oh, and exactly.
It's the frontline workers. They'll hold up. Yep. Yeah, they'll be fine. But the frontline workers that are being forced to work, they pay the ultimate price, whether it is with catching the disease more than once that leads to long-term COVID problems, whether it's actually dying of COVID during that. I mean, so for people to ignore that did happen is crazy to me. That's number one. Also, number two, they were constantly trying to make this argument that these wealthy individuals were making more money because of COVID, which is not true. Yes, they were profitable like Amazon was. Of course, they were doing a booming business of selling goods and delivering them because people were at home. But the idea that they wouldn't have made more money, which is really the better metric to compare to, is absurd. They don't want to pay for unemployment insurance for people staying at home. That costs them money. They want their workers at work, being productive and turning out their labor as, producing profits. So, I mean, that to me was this ridiculous argument that they were trying to make. And I couldn't believe how many people were like going, oh, yeah, that's right.
People still buy it. There will be people in your comment section. I guarantee you, there'll be people in your comment section who are like, big business made bank off the pandemic, and it's true. Like
they did. Hang on, they did make bank.
The Paycheck Protection Program gave shitloads of money to
bank. Exactly.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, what you have to understand, like, it doesn't. That argument doesn't hold up because when you look at the economic impact across major sectors of the economy, we were in a free fall basically. And this was like a real concern. They were freaking out. Like, yes, online marketplaces did very well. And ultimately, with the Paycheck Protection Program, a lot of big businesses got a lot of money. And a lot of smaller businesses ended up failing because they couldn't adapt to the new ways people were shot. I mean, people didn't want to go out to the store in those early months of COVID. They wanted to stay home and be safe. And a testament to that is like, look at how many Americans quit their jobs. Look at how many, like early on in the pandemic, when the market starts to crash, the quit rate drops. But then we got the CARES Act, and the CARES Act sent out stimulus checks. It expanded the unemployment to people who weren't even, traditionally employed, but like were independent contractors. And it was a lot of money. And for a lot of people, it was more money than they were making at their shitty jobs. And they said, wait, I can just make more money at home.
Wait, this is what it's like to have a decent paycheck and have a quality. They obviously the billionaires don't want people to think that way.
Yeah, and like for a lot of people,
to be happy with their shitty jobs.
It's like were limits to this, obviously, because not everybody got stimulus checks, so not everybody got that. But for a lot of like low income workers, this was a big deal, and businesses were freaking out because the labor market took a long time to recover. It was, into the summer of 2020. You still don't have, full labor force participation. You've got concerns growing, and that's when you start to see this push to reopen schools. McKinsey and Company had released a report in April 2020 that said, if you want to tap into the full productive capacity of the workforce, that's a direct quote, full productive capacity, you got to reopen schools because like 20 some odd million Americans need daycare in order to work. This entire thing, the entire all of the bullshit, all of the freakouts over COVID mitigation measures, all of the misinformation that you see today about vaccines coming from groups like Heritage, all the stuff about, these quack treatments, it's all rooted in the same place, getting people back to work and undermining public health so that we never have a response like we had with COVID again. COVID was a moment in time.
Or workers that demand. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Labor was empowered in a way that it hadn't been by COVID in decades. Suddenly the lowest paid workers, they weren't just the high school dropouts who didn't do anything with their lives. Suddenly they're the ones who are keeping society together. While the C-suite set turns out they're not all that important to the functioning of day-to-day life. So that power dynamic changed. And it was, and if those workers were essential, there's a compelling argument that they should be paid for what they're worth, for the value of their labor. And that upsets fundamentally this balance of power between capital and labor that has been hard won by the right since the Reagan years, since the advent of neoliberalism early in the 1970s. This relationship changes. And so that's where all the misinformation is rooted in. That's where all of this stuff, traces back to. They want to keep things the way it was, and they want to disempower labor, and they want to disempower the government so it can no longer provide that kind of aid to people, so that it can no longer interfere with their businesses. And it's gotten more aggressive, and they've radicalized people, and that's really the shame here. And they killed a lot of people too. Like, if we're being honest, they killed a lot of people. These people these organizations, with their
misinformation, definitely have blood on their hands.
Who are in this case, Murphy v. Missouri or Missouri v. Biden originally. These people were tools in this machine to weaponize disinformation and misinformation to do this. And they all have blood on their hands. And in my opinion,
I agree.
All of them.
Oh, I agree. They absolutely do. People died because of it. Such a deep breath out there. I agree. And I think, this is all very good. You're right, though. And here's the other thing, that awakening we've seen in the labor movement post-COVID, I think is sort of related to that, because the fact that all of a sudden people that were, barely scrubbing 2 pennies together to get by were like, oh, this is how I should at base be living. And even the unemployment wasn't even that much money. But here's the thing, Walker, it wasn't a lot of, nobody was getting rich here, right? This just speaks to how
they were just surviving.
They were barely surviving, if at all. So this just speaks to me as how badly it was, where people have been working minimum wage jobs and they can't get by off of them. And so that in turn empowered them to realize, like, no, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore as it should be. And I think that scares the crap out of the plutonymy in this country. So the Brennan Center. Oh, go ahead.
And I just wanted to say, like, there was when you look at it on the surface, like, oh, well, why did this fight turn into a fight over vaccination? Like, why all of a sudden is this a fight over vaccination?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the real reason for that is because the argument that was coming out of the right, that was coming out of like the Great Barrington Declaration, is that if we just let everybody get infected, all the healthy people will get herd immunity, and then we can go back to normal. But that didn't fucking happen. That didn't happen, and a lot of, hundreds of thousands of Americans died. And we only saw death rates plummet after a combination of infection from the disease and vaccination, widespread vaccination. So they were wrong.
They were completely wrong. I mean, that's not how you get herd immunity. You get herd immunity through vaccination.
No, it's a rather monstrous. It's a rather monstrous way to achieve low death rates, because what happens is effectively you say all the people who are going to die, and then the rest of us can move on, and that's like
eugenics,
right? Like that's
I agree.
Yeah, it's eugenics. So let's call it what it is.
Let's be clear on what you're saying. You're fine with like young children or old people that are more vulnerable dying. That's basically what you're saying. So you can make money.
Exactly. And so when the vaccine came out, and really that's when you start to see, death rates plummet. And frankly, people are still dying from COVID. I want to make clear, like, COVID is still a pandemic. We've lost more than 30,000, probably closer to 40,000 people since August. Like, it's a big deal. People are still dying, but in lower rates. We still need to do more. We need, clean indoor air quality rules. We need paid leave, universal paid leave. We need national health care. Like, those three things alone, you'll cut down on COVID deaths. Yeah. But the reason they targeted vaccines is because if you have to wait for a vaccine, then the government's response to COVID at first, the initial response, is totally justified. And so they started attacking the vaccine. And that's why a lot of, and you also have these groups that are just inherently anti-vax, like Robert Kennedy's group that's been around for years.
I mean,
but like, that's why the right made anti-vax stuff part of their ideology. It's because
but we can talk about that information. Oh, I agree, Walker. I mean, so the original anti-vax thing that happened, 15 years ago, I'm talking about, was the Wakefield study that was completely just destroyed. And he apologized. He lost his MD license, or the equivalent, I should say, in Great Britain. But point being is that this was just a bullshit study that was not real. It was quackery. He had intentionally changed, things in the study, and so it was very seriously wrong. But that misinformation traveled a million miles, right? Because Robert Kennedy still reference it as if it's a real thing, and it's not. Like, look, here we are 15 years later still dealing with that.
I mean, it's kind of like Bhattacharya's seroprevalence study, where they used tests that weren't even approved to measure, antibody levels for COVID. Recruited parents, like wealthy parents in Santa Clara, over email saying, if you participate, you'll know whether or not you can go back to work and are immune to COVID. And on top of it, Bhattacharya was an outspoken opponent of lockdowns. They didn't disclose funding from the co-founder of JetBlue, who was also an outspoken opponent of lockdowns. And this study became like the basis for all right-wing thinking on the pandemic. Oh, COVID is way more infectious and way less deadly than you think it is. Like that was the lie. That was the lie. And it doesn't bear out. A million people died in between January 20th, 2020, when the first U.S. COVID case was identified, and May 4th, 2022, 1 million Americans died from COVID. Like, that's in and of itself. And you could drop the mic there and say, you were wrong, we were right. Like, shut the fuck up. You have blood on your hands.
But that's not going to work. They're going to keep going.
Of course,
let me also point this out.
They're shameless and have,
They're shameless. They're shameless. Listen,
they're shameless. They have no obligation to the truth.
None. And I think the reason that they knew this would be such an effective wedge issue is because it's not just the right wing. There is a big portion, at least in Los Angeles, of anti-vaxxers that are on the left.
Yeah.
The original
I mean,
group of
that's
anti-vaxxers
yeah.
we had were on the left, right? So these were people that believed, why can't it, Jenny McCarthy, I couldn't think of her name for a second there, you know, and her entire thing about, you know, vaccines causing autism, which is entirely false.
Yeah.
Like not even remotely true, but a lot of that sort of originated with that. So I think that these, you know, if I'm David or Charles Koch and I'm like, what can I do to find this really great wedge issue that I can bring people in from both sides to like further my cause, to pass some laws here? This is the perfect issue because you will be able, and we've seen it. It's not just people on the right? The arguments being made are definitely right wing, but it's not solely right wingers that have been part and parcel to this conversation and have bought into the misinformation. So it's been a very effective.
People like Jimmy, you know, you've got people like Jimmy Dore out there who are like, you know, ostensibly, you know, leftists out there.
I don't think he is anymore, but yeah,
no,
I got you.
Not anymore, but outright like bullshit, you know, not like just totally wrong-headed stuff, and elevating these like right-wing operatives like Jay Bhattacharya, who is absolutely a right-wing operative. He is a fellow at the Hoover Institution, which is a Koch-funded right-wing think tank housed at Stanford. It gets funding from a number of right-wing, you know, billionaires and powerful interests. I mean, that's what it represents. These people are not your friends. They are not your friends.
No.
Their goals do not align with yours. You know, and case in point, like Jimmy made, you know, Medicare for all his big thing, right? Like, do you remember that? Like, oh, if they don't hold the vote on Medicare for all, they're blood traitors, basically. Jay Bhattacharya wrote the economic case against Medicare for all.
Of course he did.
For the fucking Cato Institute, and this is like Jimmy's buddy, right? Like, are you've lost the plot?
You've lost the plot
so many times over.
I agree. I mean, the Cato Institute is as extreme right-wing libertarian think tank. It doesn't get more anarcho-capitalist than that. Definitely not on the left. I want to talk about the Brennan Center for a second because they filed an amicus brief with this. Part of what they're saying, and your legal background will help a little bit with this, but part of what I'm deriving from this is that they're saying that ensuring that people in our republic get accurate information is sort of part of a government's legal duty, and that this really isn't spreading misinformation if they try to do that. Am I kind of getting the gist of that correct?
Sort of. So what they're arguing is they don't want it's a little complicated, and people, you know, the reality of this case isn't as sexy as the right wing narrative about it, which is the government is cracking down on speech on social media, and that's why your stupid tweets aren't doing as well as you think they are. Like that's the narrative that they're pushing. Like you would be more popular if it weren't for the government.
Which is nonsense. I mean,
no, it's bullshit. But but here's the thing. The reality of this case is that the Supreme Court has an opportunity now to hand down a ruling that would cripple the way that the federal government operates. The argument that, again, the plaintiffs are making is it's not the government's job to say what's true or false. It's only the government's job to say what is legal and illegal. That's not true. That's bullshit. It doesn't work.
That is bullshit.
Government has an interest in making sure that people have good information. And
I mean, obviously election integrity would be an obvious area where that's nonsense, right?
If you're the government, you want to make sure, just to make sure that society functions, that you are putting out accurate information, that people are getting accurate information. This would hinder the way that government deals with the press. It would hinder the way that government operates on its own. Like, it wouldn't even be able to put out, I mean, like this, the precedent that this could set would be sweeping and really, really destructive to the republic. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the outer bounds of what this could do, I don't want to speculate, but it would really devastate the way that our government currently functions and has functioned for many, many years.
Yeah.
So the issue in the case is not the First Amendment rights of these misinformation spreaders who were limited or censored by social media companies, because those social media companies weren't being coerced by the government. Now, the other side will say, oh, well, officials said, we're looking at reforming Section 230. Okay, and how's that effort going?
Yeah.
Because if the White House says we're going to reform Section 230 and you better listen to us and you better take this down because we're going to look at these reforms, guess what? That's still legal, because in order to do that reform, you need a majority in Congress and you need a majority in the Senate. It's not just those are different branches of government than the White House. This is not a threat the White House can make. That's not a threat. That's not a real threat.
Okay.
It's not credible. It lacks any staying power. And frankly, you can say it that's your First Amendment right as a government official. You're allowed to say,
you're allowed.
if we're not going to be able to work together, then we're going to have to look at reform. That's not a threat. That is just a statement. Because how is the official going to make good on that? What they can publicly call for reform, but efforts to reform Section 230 have died. They're stagnant. It's
a
not
million
happening.
times over. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just the arguments from the other side don't make any sense. They don't make any sense. But what does make sense?
But it's a great way to scare people, right? If you tell the electorate that they might lose their First Amendment rights, that's going to get a lot of people upset.
It's the same thing like with the Tea Party movement did. They get people riled up over bullshit, get them out there, and then use that outrage to intimidate, the government away from taking any action whatsoever. And this playbook has been used many, 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 many times. We saw it with the Tea Party. We saw it with COVID mitigations. Since groups like Freedom Works and Tea Party Patriots sponsored rallies against lockdowns.
Generally, all these institutions that put freedom in their title are generally not after freedom. I've noticed.
or patriots, they're not patriotic. They're just billionaire front groups. That's really what these organizations.
But they're making an appeal to a certain segment of the population, and they're doing it on grounds of constitutional rights. And it kind of pisses me off, because I think the First Amendment is sacred, right? I will be the first to defend that. And when when they do this, it's just it's inconceivable to me that they would do this. But of course they will, because they're wealthy elites and they want to, keep changing the government to serve their needs, and nobody else's. That's just one more notch.
This is an assault. This is a weaponization of the First Amendment against free speech. That's what we're seeing.
That's a great way to describe it.
They want to protect misinformation, because misinformation serves their agenda. As we have discussed, misinformation serves their agenda, which is no more government action, get everything back to normal.
Everything back to normal.
And they're willing to trample on the free speech rights of government officials. Now, I understand that most people watching this are not going to be like, those poor government officials. But it's not those poor government officials. It's the functionality of Of our representative. It's our representative democracy. That's really what they're attacking. So
that's right.
I mean, people should be aware of this case. The reporting out of the court has been that even this Supreme Court is very skeptical of this legal argument, which is
that's saying something,
right? That the more centrist justices are like very skeptical, and you have you have Thomas, you've got the far right people who are like, let's just do it, let's just damn it. But I don't know. This case, it should be open and shut.
So it might be a bridge too far, even for John Roberts or.
Oh yeah. But this shouldn't even have gotten to this point. In order to get here, it had to go through Judge Terry Doughty, who is a Trump appointee, who issues this sweeping injunction. Government cannot communicate with social media companies. It operated way outside the bounds of its First Amendment authority, of its constitutional authority, in violation of the First Amendment. Then you have the Fifth Circuit, which is notoriously conservative.
Yeah.
Trump made it even more conservative, limiting that injunction, saying this is way too far. But also, yes, the government did.
So the Fifth Circuit said it was a bridge too far. That's really something.
It limited the ruling, but it did. It did put out this tortured, ruling that said, while this was too far, government was too interwoven with the affairs of social media companies. But like even that now at the Supreme Court, like what does that mean? Like
let's talk about that for a second, actually, Walker. What does that mean? Because my understanding of looking
is the reality.
Okay, it doesn't mean anything. Because if you look at the data, for example, the number of times government officials asked Twitter to remove tweets, the amount of times they actually complied with those subpoenas is minuscule compared to the request. So what are they talking about? And you can't force...
They're talking about the raw number of requests. The fact that government was making so many requests that was too much.
And how many was that?
Ridiculous.
Was it really that many?
Where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line? Like, oh, government can talk to you this many times, but it can't talk to you. Like, it's arbitrary.
No, I mean, and let's be clear on this. The number, these cases that this includes, so people have an idea of what we're talking about. Child pornography. If the DOJ files an injunction to have that removed, that would be on that list. That's a communication coming from the government to remove something that, in my opinion, should fucking be removed. Are you serious?
Right. I mean,
but they don't bring any of that up. Yeah, where do you draw the line?
They would say that's illegal speech. That's not protected, and that's
okay. That would fit into their legal versus illegal.
But like in order to say this is illegal speech, like government is trying to work as a partner with industry. Now you can think that should not be how government operates. I think that government should regulate these companies. I think
be more adversarial or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. But they don't have many legal options open to them because it's a divided government. You have Republicans who will die on any hill to protect industry.
They'll die on any hill that's against the left, even if it makes no sense at this point.
But you also have corporate Democrats who are like very protective of business. And frankly, you have libertarian types in Congress who are very protective of, no, we shouldn't.
Right.
If we reform Section 230, like that could really hinder free speech online. And I'm sympathetic to those arguments.
Right.
At the same time, like in a public health crisis.
Right. I mean, hang on, Walker. Let's be clear. I agree with you on that. I am sympathetic to those arguments as well. I don't think the government should be, lying or outlying speech in that manner. But again, that's not what we're talking about here. And that's why this is so problematic, because the conversation has been shifted into what you're saying is like the weaponization of the First Amendment. And I agree with you. That's a great way to describe it because, yeah.
These people want to destroy our system of government and our
that's the end goal. I agree with you at this point.
The reality is they want to destroy your way of life. This is a radical, rabid right wing that we're dealing with. A
lot of it's hyper religious at this point as well. I don't think you can rule that part out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's not focused at all on making government work better. It's just focused on destroying it. And that's what you're dealing with. And there are going to be some people who think like that's great because they can't think 3 inches in front of their fucking nose. Like if the government can't function, then that means that you don't have safe food to eat, that you don't have can't rely on the substances, on the things you buy at the store.
Exactly.
Like
or even your civil liberties will no longer be protected if you're part of any sort of minority population. And by minority, I don't mean just race. I mean any sort of smaller group that's not in the bigger group. Like,
or hey, if you
part of what our government does is protect your rights, right? I mean, yeah.
Or you'll lose your First Amendment right if you become a government official. That's
bizarre. That is a bizarre argument. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
This case is so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous, and the people framing this as the big frontier in the fight for free speech.
Yeah, and they're going to keep pushing the Overton window to the right, which is why we're doing this show on Status Coup every Friday, because this Overton window has moved so far to the right that we're in crazy land all the time, on a never-ending basis. It feels like. Walker, I want to pull up the New Civil Liberties Alliance. I want to pull up this case summary page. Colin, if you could put that up, because I want people to see that this is a much broader thing than vaccines. So if you're just listening to this and saying like having a conniption over vaccines, just take a deep breath, stop and look at this stuff. And please let us be really clear on what this is about. This is really about big business taking bigger chunks of our government, getting rid of regulation that protects the working class, that protects most Americans from pollutions. Like, you want more things like that, what happened in Ohio, to happen elsewhere, where these trains derail and spew toxins all over the place. And
absolutely, Tina. Absolutely. That's
I mean,
you got it exactly right. That's exactly it. That's what they want. They want no accountability. They want to make their money any way they can. They don't care if they pollute a small town. They don't care if they pollute a city. If it makes, the ideology at play here is, if it makes money, good. If anything that gets in the way of people making money, bad. And like, look, if you don't make a lot of money, that sounds really good, right? Like, anything that gets in the way of me making money is a problem. But the reality is, it's not about you. It's about these big predatory companies that are hitting you with like hidden fees and all that stuff. Like, they don't want government interfering with their operations. You exist strictly to be exploited for the value of your labor, and as much value as they can extract out of you. And when you lose your value to them as a pay pig or whatever, they will
discard you.
Let you die faster.
I mean, they're suing HHS, they're suing the EPA. I mean, just go down this list and you can see really clearly where they're coming from.
See, if you just scrolled past the case, this argument, that conservative media outlets are being censored.
Right.
Like the Daily Wire is being censored.
Daily Wire, which is nonsense. They're not being censored. I can pull them up on my laptop right now.
They're not being censored.
They're not being censored. They're just not popular.
Yeah, and if you're these groups that are promoting, like, if you're promoting election denial, like,
yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, but if you're out there telling people, like, no, this election was rigged, and look at all the, and a social media company says, I don't want that on my website, I have no sympathy for you. I have none, zero. Like, no,
it's bad.
It's these decisions fundamentally, as you pointed out, are made by the social media companies. They don't always, in fact, most instances, they do not listen to the government because they have their own ideologies. Or business models.
If they're directed, here's the other thing that was happening that doesn't get much discussion. If Twitter gets a subpoena from the Department of Justice or another branch of government, they had a policy that they would go to the individuals whose account was being targeted and say, hey, we got this subpoena. They want to see your tweets, your DMs, whatever else, because there's some sort of probable cause there. But we're going to give you 10 days to get an attorney and quash the subpoena. If you can do that, then we won't turn over this information. We're giving you that opportunity. Twitter doesn't have to do that. They didn't have to do that, but that's how they sort of were handling it. And you could get an attorney, and if there was no real reason for it, quash it, right? So
right, and let's be clear.
That is the balance of how things work, right? How our government and how our democracy functions is based on checks and balances. And if we get too imbalanced in one direction or another, it's really problematic, and we are completely out of whack at this point.
Well, let's be clear though. Like, that's not, if you're posting online like a normal human being, posting political content or whatever, even if you're criticizing administration, you're not going to get a subpoena from the DOJ.
No. These are extreme circumstances. Let me be clear.
Extreme circumstances, like, you've got to be engaged in some illegal shit or like suspected,
which is what I meant by probable cause.
This is, but these companies, as you're pointing out, like, Twitter was very resistant to taking down any content.
That is my point. Exactly.
Any content. They're that undermines, because that undermines their relationship with their user base, and they don't want to do that.
Right.
At the same time, like, they don't want the bad press of being seen as like a platform for like terrible content, like Twitter is now. Like its reputation is like a Nazi platform.
I cannot stand Twitter anymore. It's awful.
Yeah, no, I left. I mean, how long you were on Twitter for? Longer than I was.
Yeah, I haven't been on Twitter now. I mean, I went on the other day to retweet my Unicorn Riot piece, but I don't spend any time on there. I haven't spent any time on there months and months and months. It's not useful anymore. It's just I just
check my DMs. That's it.
Yeah,
just
okay.
To see
I don't check my DMs because they're a hot mess.
Oh yeah, no, well. But I get it.
That's probably why I left.
It's a different experience, right? Like even if they hate me, they're not going to threaten to like rape me.
I would get shit like that in my DMs, 100%.
Yeah. So, but in any case, like, Twitter now has this reputation as like this platform for like Nazi speech and like
which is
conspiracy theories
accurate. I mean,
yeah,
they've literally given blue checks to literal neo-Nazis.
And look what happened, though. Their advertisers pulled out.
Of course they did.
Twitter's value plummeted.
With that?
The reason that Twitter operated the way it did was not because they had an ideological bias.
No, it was because
they wanted
money.
They wanted to make money. They wanted to make the most money and appeal to the most people. And sometimes that resulted in some content being
but this goes back to that popularity thing that you were talking about, Walker. All of these individuals believe that that what they think is a more popular opinion than what it actually is. They've convinced themselves that most Americans actually agree with them when they don't. But that is the sort of echo chamber that they all live in when they're on Gab or when they're in Telegram or these other social media sites, True Social, whatever, and they're in this echo chamber where there's just people that agree with them. It makes them believe that their opinions are much stronger, much more popular than they actually are. And then they come to deal with broader America, and broader America is like, yeah, fuck Nazis.
Are you kidding me? Yeah. Like, are you what? No, absolutely not. And they feel very, dejected and isolated. And, if you're a Nazi, that's exactly how you should feel, and fuck you. But, you should feel bad about yourself. You should feel bad, and you should hate yourself, and like, but you don't have to be a Nazi. You don't have to be a Nazi. Soul searching and realize that maybe the problem isn't the Jews or whoever else you hate. Maybe it's not trans people. Maybe your problem is you.
My backwards ideas just aren't popular. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't threaten women and then expect them to date me.
Exactly. And maybe it's not the Jew. Maybe you're not poor because of the Jews. Maybe you're poor because these right-wing politicians that you
stealing your money,
love so much are helping rich people steal your fucking money.
Right.
Like, it's just this whole it's like Naomi Klein's book where she talks about like sort of this mirror world. They live in this mirror world, this world of untruths. They've created a new information ecosystem.
Right.
It is rife with conspiracy theories and lies and just outright bullshit. And that's where they want their people going. And it's been a long time project. They've got a network of right-wing think tanks and an echo chamber to blast this shit out. They've got right-wing media. And now, the Republican Congress is absolutely going to put out a scathing COVID report where they say, that these quack treatments were censored improperly, and like it's just wild.
Which isn't true either.
I mean, you're watching
people
insanity.
Could buy. It is insanity. It's crazy to me. I think you said you had a video you wanted to play.
I did a video about this case, but it got taken down. Ironically.
Okay, so
I was like, it's not that big a deal. Like these social media companies, they're like, these were requests and they're taking stuff down, and like it's not censorship. And then of course the video I made about it gets taken down, and I'm like, what the hell is wrong with it? Like, what is wrong with TikTok? This is injustice. But no, it's hosted by
but it's true. The algorithms in YouTube and all of these, they can't differentiate between anti-vaxxer information and reporting on anti-vaxxer information. I mean, we've had a million problems with this here at Status Coup. So
if you watch some of the videos that are up from this rally, like it's wild. Like this one guy is like, if you want healthy kids, like stay away from the vaccines forever. It's like, okay, like what? Yeah, you sure, dude. You know more than like the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the World Health Organization. Like yeah.
Okay, let me read some of these quotes you have. Okay, so from the videos. So Andrew Lowenthal, I think he's with the LiberNet group that we talked about earlier. So he claimed the COVID crisis. This is a quote.
This is not from the rally. This is just from LiberNet and his announcement of LiberNet. Just to clarify for people.
Yes, no, thank you for clarifying that. So the COVID crisis ushered in a new level of authoritarianism, much of it made possible by digital technologies, but also by a new progressive culture that craves the hammer of state power. Why does he? I would say progressive culture is the exact opposite of that. Most progressives are like anti-authoritarianism.
I've never met this dude, but
anti-fascist, anarchist. Like these are, I mean, clearly not. What is he? Ham or what?
I've never met this person. I want to clarify that what is about to come out of my mouth is pure speculation. But I would bet that he's got a copy of Ayn Rand, the
Yes.
Fountainhead, or you know, Atlas Shrugged, and like a well-worn copy.
A well-worn.
Like,
I mean, to be fair, I own both of those books, but I have a philosophy master's degree, so I'm allowed
these
to have
people.
those.
These people have like a very adolescent view of freedom.
Ayn Rand has an incredibly adolescent view of the world. I mean, this is a person that basically tried to make an argument that altruism was immoral.
Right. What was the quote from Ayn Rand where it's like the question isn't like who's gonna let me, it's who's gonna stop me. Like,
right.
Okay. Okay. It's not a face, Mom. It's not a face.
But wildly, she was really good at crafting like
things that appeal to collegiate.
Like, no, her
collegiate
well-developed
privileged
characters,
white
like
guys.
those books. 100% if you're looking at the philosophy, but the books were really interesting books character-wise and whatnot. So if you weren't looking at what the point was philosophically, I'm just saying, I got to give her that.
Didn't she like model one of the characters after like a child murderer?
Shit, did she? I didn't know that.
I think she did. I think she did. I think one of her characters was like, she viewed him as like this like really intriguing, like sort of Ubermensch type of you know, like almost admired this.
Yeah, the main guy in Atlas Shrugged. Yeah,
this character, but the person he was based on was like a child murderer. Fact check me on that, people in the comments. Google.
Yes, I would like to know. Okay, so I want to have this other script. How do you pronounce this guy's name?
Cariotti.
Thank you, Cariotti. So Cariotti, this is basically what you were talking about earlier. The government's job was not to determine what is true and false, but only what is legal speech and illegal speech. So
just to be clear, that means that when the government puts out is going to, you know, when government officials like Joe Biden are going to talk to people about the state of the pandemic, it's not his job to say what's true and what isn't true.
That's crazy to me.
Or like government officials when they like it's just that's a wild statement, and he says it so authoritatively.
Wait, hang on. The seedbed of totalitarianism is how he describes this. The seedbed of totalitarianism. He suggested that failure to protect speech questioning the safety of COVID vaccines and the integrity of the 2020 election, which he characterized as speech that challenges the reigning ideology, was the road to concentration camps.
Yeah, he starts out, he's saying like, you know, every totalitarian regime, the thing they all have in common is that they outlaw questions. And then if you disagree, you know, like if you disagree, then
nobody here is outlawing questions.
It's not the, you know, the concentration camps, it's not the whatever, but it's the questions. And then they'll put you in the concentration camp. It's like you're suggesting that if social media companies take action because government asks them to,
or because they lose ad dollars,
that's the road to concentration camps.
Yeah,
like fuck you, dude. I'm sorry, but like
that's ridiculous.
Are you kidding?
I agree.
Like I'm Jewish and I have family members who vanished and never heard from again in the Holocaust. Yeah. Like, and you're gonna draw that.
It's
parallel?
Offensive.
Yeah. Fuck you. Like learn some history, get some context. And by the way, you're not a fucking legal expert. So stop presenting your, I don't know. It frustrates me. These people are very frustrated.
It's infuriated. They are. Okay. So then he goes on to say, if they can do it on issues related to public health, if they can do it on issues related to the elections, they can do it on anything. So let me say this. The government exists to comment on public health and elections. Even if you have a viewpoint that a small government is better, the basic idea of government at that point, if it's small, is for public safety.
Yeah.
And elections. Absolutely. Those are the two areas that you would want them to be involved in. If not, this is just bizarre to me.
You gotta love the reference there to gender ideology. He gives, he's just giving at this point, these groups
Well, let me go on to read that before you say that. So,
sorry, I thought you had. I'm sorry.
No, but because you knew it was coming next.
I knew it was coming.
He said going on to say government was censoring on topics like abortion and gender ideology, the right-wing term for a recognition of the existence of transgender Americans. Take any lightning rod, debated, contested question in American public life. The federal government had its thumb on the scale and was trying to suppress and censor the speech of ordinary Americans. So again, it's that jackbooted idea. You've got the government's, boot on your neck, and
your hate
but that's
speech
not
would be
the
more
case.
popular if it weren't for the government.
Right.
You would be your terrible ideas would be more popular if it
right.
were
The
for,
fact
that
you're in front of SCOTUS right now having a rally and saying all kinds of things like this is a testament to the fact that your free speech is still intact.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. They're like outside the Supreme Court rallying and spouting this nonsense, and it's being, streamed, and press is covering it and everything. You're not being censored. You weren't censored.
And which Walker always takes me back to the dark money roots. I think that's why this is important. It's guys like Charles Koch, Heritage, Project 2025, whatever, these organizations that are comprised mainly of very wealthy individuals and corporations have learned how to sort of manipulate the American psyche to produce effects that allow them to keep changing laws to their benefit that don't benefit the vast majority of Americans.
Because Tina, it sells better than saying I'm a rich guy and I want to be even richer and I don't owe you anything. Like that.
Right.
That's really what their arguments are, is that the rich don't owe us anything. They are benevolent, and we should respect them for their contributions because we're so lucky that they're even here spending their money. That's the entire right-wing ideology, minus white supremacy.
Welcome to 2024 minus white supremacy, which I'm sure is in all of this as well.
But this rally, these talking points, he's throwing anti-trans stuff out there. He's giving a hat tip to election denial. It's all converging.
It's all there.
They want to attract all. If you believe one conspiracy theory, you're going to believe all of them. But if you
likely in my experience, that's true. It's a small group of people that believe conspiracy theories, but they tend to believe more than one if they do. I think that's probably true. Probably not 100%, but likely, yeah. Let me ask you this. So SCOTUS has agreed to hear this now. What's the situation with that?
So the justices the reporting seems to be that the justices are skeptical, which is good. And it's got people who are in support of this case freaking out. And that's great because their freak out is delicious. It's delicious watching these people who don't either don't understand
it's glad to know that there are bridges that are bridges too far in 2024.
I certainly hope so. I mean, this case could really destroy the way our government functions.
Yeah, no, it's
in a very critical way. And what these anti-vax groups want is they want the government. They want to see that happen, but only because they think that if the court rules that way, it's going to validate their bullshit. Right. It's going to put it on the same level as scientific fact, because again, they want to equate. They want to make the difference between fact and fiction opinion, and that's not how it works. Even if you believe that ivermectin is going to treat your COVID, it's not, and you can believe it with your full chest, and it won't help you.
No, I mean the problem is so much of the country,
and it won't help you.
Lives in sort of a post-truth world where now whatever opinion you want to have can be called the truth. And personally for me, I'm hair catching on fire kind of a thing, because I do believe there is such a thing as objective truth, and that we should strive towards that, especially in the media. I mean, let's be honest, media's been part of the problem here.
It has, because these people are able, the outrage that they generate gets coverage, and then in that coverage, in order to seem fair to the people that they're covering, reporters won't take a position, or they'll give them at least enough column space to make their case. That's not how you should deal with these groups. Right. That is not in the way that I deal with these groups is I'll report on what they're doing. I'm not gonna give them column space to promote their misinformation. I'll write what they're saying. I'm not going to go to them and be like, well, tell me, why are you doing this? Like, I'll say, this is what I'm reporting. If you want to comment on what I'm reporting, you can do that, but that's it.
There you go.
And this piece, this piece is just straight up, I'm just reporting on what they're doing. This doesn't require
comment. I got
comment.
you.
Like, don't give these people give them as little platform as you can, especially in the face of, the harm that they're causing, because they're causing.
There is harm. Any final thoughts on this before we turn to our super chats and whatnot?
Yeah, I just want to be absolutely clear for people. Like, be aware when stuff like this comes down the pipeline. Be aware of who the interests are,
that are funding it,
that are at work, because and look for the bigger picture. Like,
is there an ulterior motive?
Yeah, why are they saying this? And
Right.
I get that there are problems with with mainstream orthodoxy. There are often issues, and I think the Israel-Gaza situation
Prime
is
example.
a really good
Walker,
example
that is sort of it, isn't it? So all of these things do have a kernel of truth at the base. I think most
the kernel of
conspiracy theories
truth is that the mainstream sometimes does get it wrong, and they can get it wrong, and it can be disastrous. The Iraq War, the WMDs,
right.
the situation with Israel, the dogmatic support of Israel, like, you can have that,
right.
and fundamentally, like, people understand, like, there's corruption in government, there's corruption in the medical field, and that skepticism is well founded, but like, at the end of the day, you got to look at.
But don't let anybody prey upon that well-founded skepticism, because that is a problem too, right?
You got to look for credible experts. And I'm sorry, but a credible expert is not going to tell you that they're an expert in everything. Like, and when you look at you look at the right-wing doctors who are promoting this misinformation about COVID, about vaccines, and you look at what their expertise actually is, like Jay Bhattacharya, he is not a medical doctor. He doesn't treat COVID patients. He is a health economist. He never was licensed to treat patients. Like, this is Martin Kulldorff is a biostatistician. Tracy Beth Hoeg was a physical medicine doctor before the pandemic. Now she's an epidemiologist. Like, Vinay Prasad is a cancer doctor, like a hematologist. Like, these are not infectious disease specialists. Like, listen to people who are credible experts in the field. And Bhattacharya, by the way, has weighed in not just on epidemiology and the spread of the virus and the infectiousness of the virus, but the psychological effects of lockdowns on kids. And what expertise does he have to talk about that? None. Like, you're not gonna look for people who are willing to be honest about the limitations of their
or look at the peer review surrounding them, right? If you have one guy saying something that sounds kind of wrong, go look at the peer review, because I guarantee if he's saying something wrong, there's going to be 60 other doctors going like, yeah, no, bro. You know what I'm saying?
Peer review is problematic for a number of reasons now today. And we will.
Is it? That's not good.
We'll get there. I'm working on something about medical journals and everything, but like, generally
they're coming
speaking,
they're going to mess those up now too. Damn.
Look for credible voices. Like, throughout COVID, like the mainstream, the view that like COVID was airborne. That was something that didn't catch on enough. That they were wrong about that. But there were people who were like, no, COVID is an aerosol. It's aerosolized. It's, and they were correct. Independent.
They were correct. And that's why it was so contagious.
Yeah. Like, but you did have doctors who said, no, COVID is, it's mostly droplets. It's not airborne. And they were incorrect. But these vaccines, there's so much real world data. There's billions of doses have gone out. We know they're effective. We know that they lower your risk. We know that the vaccinated are less likely to get infected. They're less likely to get hospitalized. They're less likely to get to die. They're less likely to even get long COVID. Like, we know the vaccines are protective.
Yes.
And we know that that's true for every major age demographic that we have. Like, there's no reason not to get vaccinated unless your
I
doctor
agree.
is
I'm
telling you
100% vaccinated.
don't, unless
so.
your doctor says you have a medical condition, this will not be good for
Right.
you. Don't get vaccinated, or you're allergic to something. Like, there's no reason not to get vaccinated.
Right on, right on. Okay, Colin, do we have some super chats or questions for Walker or whatnot? Tony D. What's up, Tony D? Great show today, Tina. Proud member of this outlet. We love you, Tony. Props to Tony. Oh, 2 from Tony. All right. Capitalism puts profit over people. Indeed, it does. Even a pandemic didn't change that mindset. That's what we need to change in this society. I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. I mean, raw capitalism is entirely immoral. It's like a psychopath, right? It's only motivated by one thing, and that is making profits for the capitalist. Period. End of story. So this is why this like extreme anarcho-capitalist, right-wing libertarian stuff is so detrimental to our society, because they want that vicious sort of capitalism to just be the law of the land, because they're the ones that are going to benefit from it, and they don't care. They don't have any sort of, empathetic feeling towards anybody that is on the poor end of that, right?
There were so many things that we should have done to humanely respond to this crisis that would have been better.
I agree.
Than what
Having
we
a
did.
UBI would have made sense. I mean, all of Europe
like-
had a UBI, and they obviously dealt with it much better than we did. But again, the corporate forces in this country can't see their way to not being greedy, and I don't
Also,
see our
like,
government stopping that. I mean, in many ways, they enable it. So
our system, the World Health Organization Director General was like, "Hey, remove financial barriers to care and fully fund public health health systems." Like, that was early on in the pandemic,
100%.
and that would have required like an overhaul of our healthcare system, where
Right.
people skip care that they need, and people don't have primary care physicians. Like 30% of Americans don't have primary care physicians. Well, you want to know how that plays out? That doctors, your PCP turns out to be the most important voice in your vaccination decision. So when you have 30% of people who don't have a primary care physician, of course you're going to have widespread skepticism of the healthcare system and of vaccines and whatnot. Like, it's just, there were so many things we could have done to humanely respond, and these right-wing groups and operatives never wanted them on the table. That's why you get the economic case against Medicare for All by Jay Bhattacharya.
Exactly. I think the other obvious thing too, in addition to the Medicare for All, because that's the obvious one, is that none of them seem to have a problem with the fact that pharmaceutical companies get to hold on to their patents, even though a big majority of their research is funded by taxpayer dollars.
This is why I come on this show. This is why I come on this show, because this shit, and it's so refreshing. Yeah, absolutely. The biggest problem right now with the vaccines, and really I think the only problem that I can, as not a doctor, can say about the vaccines, is that they are patented, and they are life-saving medical treatments, medicines that are patented, so we can't vaccinate the world, and that is a problem.
If you're in a poor country, like the attitude was like basically screw you. But it kills me that, I mean, when you look at, like, for example, if you go back in time to the polio vaccine, there was no patent on the polio vaccine,
right? And for the reason of, we got to stop polio, but like,
exactly, because it's a public health issue, which is why the government funds this research, is because it is a public health issue. But the problem here, this is the neoliberalism that you're talking about at play, right? The neoliberal dogma that we privatize everything while also, limiting regulation has been really detrimental. You end up with these inconceivably insane things where the pharmaceutical company takes the government money. So they're like, hey, socialism is great when it comes to risk.
Like Moderna,
profit. Like, oh no, fuck you. That is our money. We're capitalists. How dare you touch our money? I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Public money went into the development of mRNA technology. Yeah. Absolutely. Like, this is a global, COVID is a global health crisis, and like the response to it has to be global.
Yes,
there should have been way more. Our government should have been way more cooperative with the world. I mean, Donald Trump, like, backed away from the World Health Organization.
Yeah, he did.
like
Wildly, though.
like
Wait, did
what?
you see? Hang on. Did you see a couple weeks ago that he was trying to take credit for COVID vaccines and all this kind of stuff because Biden had talked about it in his State of the Union? It was funny to me because he's like, I was president, blah, blah, blah. He's bragging about this.
But he's right about that, at least.
He is right about that, but hang on. All of his anti-vaxxer followers were losing their fucking minds.
That's ridiculous. I mean, it's just so, it's like, this is the state of America today, right? Like, Trump's Operation Warp Speed develop did get the vaccines developed in record time, and it was a success, a resounding success. The problem is that the Trump administration and the Biden administration have been very protective of pharmaceutical IP. So there was this effort at the World Trade Organization to waive the IP to allow vaccine development in poorer nations. And the U.S. fought that. There was it was called the TRIPS waiver proposal. It was by India and South Africa. The U.S. fought it. Then kind of the Biden administration kind of said, "Hey, we have our own kind of waiver proposal," but it was much more limited. That now there's talk of
that whole lesser evil thing.
Pandemic. Now there's talk of an international pandemic treaty that they're trying to hash out, which will provide for patent-free medicines, and the U.S. is still kind of balking with Western neoliberal powers. Like,
it's crazy.
It's capitalism. Neoliberal capitalism is fundamentally at odds with the survival of humanity and the advancement.
I agree. And neoliberalism is something that both the right and the left have engaged in. Let's be honest. This isn't neoconservative, I call it neoist at some point because I think so much of the dogma from both the neoconservative and neoliberal, it's the same dogma. They're just selling it to their base in a different way. But it is really about the privatization of public goods, public services, the government itself,
coupled
with this idea that the free market can be the moral arbiter of decision making, which is completely psychopathic when you think about it, and that there should be no regulation, right? So this is sort of where our government went to post-Reagan, post-Clinton, because I think both Reagan and Clinton had a hand in that. And I don't think we've had a president since then that has sort of stood up against that kind of ideology. It's sort of just become dogmatic to the U.S. American government, which is crazy. Look, it's also, I think, why we have an increase in extremism in the country. People are angry.
And there's reason for that. Look, there
is 100% a reason for it. I get it. I get why people are angry.
I don't, like to sort of talk about my, personal life, I guess, on shows like this or on Twitter or whatever. But like, I grew up in a very, very wealthy area, and like the adulation of wealthy people in this country, I can say, growing up where I grew up is absolutely unwarranted. These people are terrible. They're terrible. That's not a blanket statement. I know people who have money who are very nice people, but as a demographic, the money, the wealth that exists where I grew up is destructive. It is predatory. It doesn't give a fuck about the local community. Yeah. That's the reality of wealth everywhere. Everywhere. And everywhere I've been, that's, every like Brooklyn apartment that I've rented and contributed to gentrification, like that's wealth is destructive, and it's from the top down. Yeah. It is destructive from the top down. Like, we have got to do something about inequality in this country.
Yeah, and it's out of control.
The efforts to undermine solidarity and deliver that kind of redistributive program is like, it's pervasive. It's dangerous. It relies on misinformation.
Yeah,
this is all untenable. To break solidarity. The anti-vax stuff, it's a wedge issue. The COVID stuff, it's a wedge issue. Wealth wants to protect itself, and that's what's happening.
Oh, I 100% agree with that. These wedge issues are very effective for doing that. And these folks know it, right? That's all it is.
That's all it is. They just want to protect what they have. And they don't care. They eat at the same restaurants. Liberal, conservative wealth, they eat at the same restaurants. They go to the same parties. They all hang out together.
Don't kid yourself.
Yeah, and there is class solidarity at the top, and
Yes.
and horrible division beneath.
Underneath. I think that is a very accurate statement.
They drive that division. They use their shadowy network of nonprofits and dark money groups. They use their media outlets. They stack the courts to prevent popular democracy, because the courts are fundamentally anti-democratic institutions.
I agree. Like, they fan the flames of the culture wars because they know that is such a distraction from all this other stuff, right?
Yes,
and it has been.
Yes, and I want to be very clear. I'm not saying that the only battle in America that's worth a damn talking about is wealth versus everybody else.
No, I don't know, but I don't think anybody thinks
I
that.
fully acknowledge white supremacy is a problem that extends all the way up and to all the way down. But like this issue of like public health, the war on public health, it serves one purpose, and that is to protect wealth.
Yeah.
And that we have got to do something about that. We have to expose it. You do great work exposing it. I try to do great work exposing it. Like this, it will break us in the long term. The level of wealth inequality that we have in this country will break us. Yeah. We have got to do something.
It already is, honestly, in my opinion. And in fact, I could make the argument that the increase in fascism in the country is being driven by a lot of the income inequality that we're talking. I mean, it's worse now than it was in the 20s. And I think that
it's very bad.
These things are related. I mean, is it the only factor? No, of course not. But is it a factor? Yes, I think so. Yeah.
No,
all right, Colin.
absolutely.
Colin, are there more super chats? We got a little in the weeds there on that one. Dave L. Thank you, Dave L. No. I mean, me too. The left's job, if it's going to be successful, is going to be institution building. What would that look like? That is a really good point, I think, institution building. Yeah, so to recreate, rebuild what is being destroyed.
That's
that is tough, because I don't disagree with that, because there has to be something better than I feel like right now everything is defensive, right? Whether you're making an argument in politics, they're like, hey, have you seen the other guy? He's worse, he's evil. Or whether it's like, we have to put all these pebbles in the dam to stop what's happening now from happening. There needs to be something more offensive, being on the offense, like offering something that is positive, right? And I think institution building is a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, a big thing that you can do is support independent journalism. That's a bit of a shameless plug, not just for Status Coup, but for our own efforts over at Important Context.
No, but it is important.
And the Opt Out Media Foundation, like journalism today, one of the, I think a really big problem is that there's really no money in it. There's just, it's a dying industry.
You do because you love it. Truly.
Yeah, you do it because you love it, and maybe that's it.
Or you have the calling for it, or whatever else, because the money is gone.
And you have a safety net, or
right.
a spouse who has a real job, or whatever. Like journalism today, it's legacy institutions that are kind of terrible, or right wing. That's who's hiring, and it's mostly right wing. Like the Epoch Times.
There's a ton of money. There's a lot of money going into right-wing media.
One American News, or all of these outlets that are on the right. That's where the money is. And if you want to do something and you want to build infrastructure, it has to start with the press. You need a independent media. You need a reliable media, and stop. Throwing money at influencers who rehash reporting and don't do the original reporting, who just communicate.
Original reporting is where it's really suffering, because that's right. They might be entertaining.
They're entertaining, but like they're not out there like you and I are doing the reporting. Like that's the work. Without
that is the work,
that,
and just so people understand what you're saying,
do.
some of these, if you're doing an investigative piece, you're spending months and months and months on one piece, sometimes years. The one I just published, it was 3 years long. I was looking at this stuff, and then you get paid.
Great, by the way, it's hard to read, but like really morally difficult to read, but very well reported.
But then you do it and you get $500. That was 3 years of your life. So just so
Oh my
people
God.
have an understanding of what we're talking about. So
It's so bad. It's so difficult.
it
Like,
didn't used to be that way, right? Like
no,
an
like,
outlet.
look, you can make. Sorry, I keep walking over you. I'm really sorry.
That's okay.
I don't mean
No,
to keep. I think there's a delay on my side.
That's okay. Yeah, there is. That's all right. I still love you.
Please continue. Make the wonderful point you were making.
No, that's good. I was just going to say, I mean, I think people should realize that part of the problem is that the independent outlets don't have the money to pay writers more, right? They're limited in what they have to put on offer. It's not that they're greedy and they're keeping all the money. That's not it at all.
Exactly.
And then the other side of that is like, I've also written for organizations that do have venture capital, whatnot. They might pay a little better, but then they pull the wool out from under you one day, and then that's that. So
and they'll scoop you. They'll take your
they'll scoop you.
Yeah.
Or they'll do that. They'll turn your pitch into a tip.
It's not worth the. I mean, you could make more money, and I know, speaking from experience, like I did make more money writing like opinion pieces, like hot takes, but that's everybody has an opinion, and frankly, there are people with better opinions. There's people with better opinions, but the work that's important, that is like investigating and like pulling doing federal records requests.
Also, that costs money. It takes time and money. I have a FOIA request I'm doing right now, Walker, that I'm paying almost $200 for. I am positive there will be something juicy in there, but there might not be.
Right.
And if there isn't, I spend $200 on that.
And you'll spend
and then I'll sell an article
40
for
hours.
Yeah, and then I'll get $300 exactly, and I'll get $300 payment for the article I write off of the one I spent $200 and all that time for. So just so people get an idea of what we're talking about, we're not whining because we're
No, it's less than it.
It's just a really sad state of affairs.
It's less than minimum wage. It's less than
100%.
Like, let's be real. It is. It's ridiculous. It's like the industry is so in trouble. And if you and the jobs at the more stable outlets are so few and far between. And the Washington Post just laid off. What did they lay off? Like 10%.
Yeah, a bunch of people. Yeah.
If the Washington Post, which is, Bezos could have funded those jobs, and he's choosing not to.
He's choosing not to. If the Washington Post
there's no money in holding power accountable, and there's a lot of money.
That's the problem.
But there's a lot of money.
These are organizations that used to do that, though, right? So the Fourth Estate, right? If you want to talk about that, holding power into account, adversarial journalism. These were sort of the things that a paper of record would do, right? And then money came in. Then everything became for profit, and that is, in my opinion, what is at the base of why this is so gutted out, right? Because news gathering isn't supposed to be a for-profit endeavor. It's a public good. It's a public
we should
service.
have government grants. The government should be giving grants to journalistic outfits like that. That's absolutely what they should be doing. And it should be generous about that. Like, let's be clear. Like, government should be giving generous grants to reporting outfits that are factual and
are nonprofit, like truly nonprofit, not like
not
like a dark money.
This is a ridiculous situation today where, Fox News gets to hire because they've got money. Epoch Times gets to hire because they've got money.
Right, because
these
they're
are
getting
dark money groups. They're funded.
Dark money groups funding them that we're talking about today.
Epoch Times is dark money. Fox is for profit.
Media. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the destruction of the industry. But you as a journalist, and I'm sure you can relate to this, but I will spend, easily 15, 20 hours on an article, and that's just a normal investigation.
And then some, yeah.
And or then some. I have a piece now that I spent, a solid, definitely from my work habits are weird. Like, I'll be up from I'll start working at like 2 p.m. and finish at 4 a.m. But all that time, it's not hourly. I'll get a flat fee for the piece that I get. And as you said, it'll be the pieces will come out, and if you do run it with an outlet, you maybe get $500.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable. That's not.
No, it's not.
And these outlets, they can't cover everything. We need journalists. So.
And they have limited money to pay, freelancers that aren't staff at this point as well. It's just, it's a whole mess.
Yeah.
It's a whole mess. All
I
right.
see somebody in the comments, get some sleep. You'll be more
Get some sleep.
productive. Look, it's my ADHD brain. It's how it works. My old editor used to tell me all the time, like, you need more regular like sleep hours. And like, yeah, I get into these modes. But
I do too.
Yeah,
when I'm like a rabbit down the hole. I'm like, oh wait, what?
yeah. But like, this is the problem, right? Like you don't, journalism doesn't, that investigative work doesn't pay. You could make more money writing hot takes.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that's and frankly, if you spend like 40 to 60 hours on a single article, like a big investigation, or it's a long or months, you spend months investigating, and then you get your flat, your shit flat fee, and then you get on top of that, like several hits on social media, and that's it. Like, people move on to the next thing, and then you'll like I would find that I would spend like a long time doing a big investigation, and then I would like write some like hot take on Twitter, and that would blow up, and the article that I spent like like months on would just stagnate. Like, oh, maybe I get like 300 likes on the article, but like 14,000 on this like hot take.
No, it's true.
Seconds. The incentives are terrible. Social media is destroying journalism as well. We could talk about this for hours and hours, and I could bitch and bitch and bitch. There are people who are far worse off than both of us, and they don't want to hear it.
That's true. All right. Do we have others, Colin? After Dave L? That was Dave L.
That was all of them.
That's all of them. Right on. I appreciate you, Colin. Thank you for popping in and letting me know that. All right. So everybody, it is the end of our show. Walker, if people want to follow your work, important context, opt out, which...
Yeah, so subscribe to Important Context if you can. I know that it's, everybody's feeling it today. Or if you want, you can make if you're going to do a one-time... If you want to do a one-time donation, donate to the Opt-Out Media Foundation. We are a nonprofit, 501c3.
And download the app.
Yeah, download the app, and you could, that's a tax-deductible donation. We are currently trying to raise money because we're doing a long-form, limited series podcast on the pandemic response and how we got so screwed.
Oh, okay.
Basically,
right on.
It'll cover the Trump administration, the Biden administration, and the dark money and the business interests.
Oh, good.
That's what we're trying to raise some money for.
Very juicy.
No, and it's already I've been doing so much research for this.
Right on. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm glad you could make it. Everybody else, thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with us. We'll see you next week, and have a fantastic weekend.
And I'm sorry for being late.
That's okay.